She sat in her decade-old sedan watching the eviction notice flutter against the windshield, placed there by a landlord who'd stopped caring about excuses 3 months ago. But in 72 hours, the struggling waitress who worked double shifts just to feed her daughter would discover that the abandoned clock tower she inherited wasn't just crumbling stone and frozen gears. It was hiding a $397 million secret in the mechanism vault that would change everything. Before we explore this incredible journey, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The sound came first.
If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today.
That's what Elena Reeves would remember later, when people asked her to tell the story. The sound of all the clocks stopping at exactly the same moment. It was 3:47 in the morning on a Tuesday in late November, and Elena was awake because she was always awake at 3:47. That was the hour when anxiety lived, when the math of her life refused to add up no matter how many times she calculated it. Rent plus utilities plus groceries plus gas divided by her waitress salary plus tips equaled a number that never quite reached zero, always falling short, always leaving her one emergency away from disaster. She sat at the small kitchen table in their apartment, the one with the wobbly leg she tried to fix 3 times, surrounded by bills organized by urgency. Red notices on the left. Final warnings in the middle. Court summons on the right. The eviction notice sat by itself, circled an angry highlighter, giving her until Friday to vacate the premises. That's when it happened. Every clock in the apartment stopped. The battery-powered wall clock in the kitchen. The digital display on the microwave. The alarm clock in her bedroom. Even her phone, plugged into the charger on the counter, its screen suddenly frozen at 3:47. Elena stared at her phone, tapped it, watched the screen stay dark. Then, slowly, it flickered back to life. 3:48, the clocks resumed. The microwave blinked back to normal. The wall clock's second hand jerked forward. But the moment had felt significant, like the universe pressing pause to tell her something she wasn't quite ready to hear. Her daughter Lily's voice came from the bedroom doorway. "Mama? Why are you up?" Elena plastered on the smile she'd perfected over the past 18 months, the smile that said everything was fine even when nothing was. "Just doing some paperwork, baby." "Why aren't you asleep?" "Bad dream." Lily was 7, small for her age, with dark curls and her father's green eyes. Eyes that saw too much, understood too much. "Are we going to be okay?" The question hit Elena like a physical blow. How many times had Lily asked that in the past year? How many times had Elena lied and said yes? "Come here." Elena pulled her daughter onto her lap, breathed in the strawberry scent of her hair. "We're going to be okay. I promise." "You always say that, but you look scared." Elena's throat tightened. "Being scared doesn't mean things won't work out. It just means we care about each other enough to worry." "Is Daddy coming back?" "No, baby. Daddy's not coming back." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then, "Good. He made you sad." Elena held her tighter. Robert had left 14 months ago, disappeared with a woman from his office and most of their savings. The divorce papers had come by mail, already signed, with a note that said he'd start sending child support once he got settled in his new life. So far, settled hadn't happened. Neither had child support. "Go back to bed," Elena whispered. "You have school in a few hours. Will you stay with me until I fall asleep?" "Always." Elena carried her daughter back to the bedroom they shared now, since she'd converted the second bedroom into a makeshift office hoping to start a freelance bookkeeping business that never quite materialized. She lay beside Lily, holding her hand, and stayed until the little girl's breathing deepened into sleep. Then she returned to the kitchen table and her impossible math. The letter arrived 3 days later, on Friday morning, the day she was supposed to be out of the apartment. Elena found it wedged in her mailbox alongside the usual collection of bills and advertisements. The envelope was cream-colored, expensive-looking, with a return address that read, "Morrison and Associates, Estate Law, 847, Charter Street, Millbrook. Elena didn't know anyone in Millbrook. Didn't know anyone who used estate lawyers. She opened it standing beside her car, keys in hand, already late for her morning shift at the diner. Dear Ms. Reeves, the letter began. We are writing to inform you of an inheritance left to you by Mr. Theodore Bancroft, who passed away on October 14th of this year. Mr. Bancroft was your maternal grandmother's brother, making him your great-uncle. As his sole surviving relative, you are the beneficiary of his estate, which includes the property known as the Bancroft Clock Tower, located at 1200 Harmon Avenue, Millbrook. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to arrange transfer of the deed. The property has been vacant for approximately 30 years. All taxes have been paid through December of this year. Sincerely, Jonathan Morrison, Attorney at Law. Elena read it twice. 3 times. The words didn't change. She didn't remember having a great-uncle Theodore. Her grandmother had died when Elena was 12, and they'd never been close to that side of the family. But a property. A clock tower. In her current situation, even a broken-down building was more than she had. She pulled out her phone and called the number on the letterhead. A woman answered on the second ring. Morrison and Associates. Hi, I'm Elena Reeves. I just received a letter about an inheritance. Oh yes, Ms. Reeves. Mr. Morrison has been trying to reach you for several weeks. Let me transfer you. The hold music was brief. Then a man's voice, elderly but sharp. Ms. Reeves. Thank you for calling. I'm Jonathan Morrison. The letter says I inherited a clock tower. You did indeed. The Bancroft Clock Tower has been in your family since 1889. Your great-uncle Theodore was the last living Bancroft. He passed away at the age of 94, and his will specifically names you as his sole heir. I don't understand. I never met him. He was aware of you, nonetheless. He was very particular about his estate going to family, even distant family. Morrison paused. The property is unique, I should warn you. It's been closed for 3 decades. The structure is sound, but it requires significant work. What kind of work? It's a 5-story tower built in the late 1800s. The clock mechanism hasn't functioned since 1994. The interior needs renovation. But the building itself is architecturally significant. It's on the historical register. Elena's mind raced. What's it worth? In its current condition? Perhaps $200,000, possibly more to the right buyer. The land alone is valuable, it's in downtown Millbrook on a prominent corner. $200,000. Elena's hand trembled. That was enough to pay her debts, start over, give Lily stability. When can I see it? She asked. I can meet you there tomorrow if you're available. Shall we say 10 a.m.? Elena looked at her phone. She'd already called in sick to the diner, knowing she couldn't show up after being evicted. I can be there at 10. Excellent. I'll text you the address. That night, Elena packed their belongings into the same garbage bag she'd unpacked from when Robert left. Everything they owned fit into the back of her sedan. Lily helped, asking no questions, her face solemn with the understanding that their life was changing again. The landlord had left a final notice on the door, vacate by 6 p.m. or sheriff will remove you. Elena left the keys on the kitchen counter and walked away from the only home Lily had ever known. They slept in the car that night, parked in a 24-hour grocery store lot. Elena stayed awake, watching Lily sleep in the back seat, wrapped in blankets, and wondered if she was making another terrible mistake by driving to Millbrook to see a property that was probably worthless. But she didn't have anywhere else to go. The drive took 2 hours. Millbrook turned out to be a small town nestled in a valley, the kind of place that looked like it had been frozen in time somewhere around 1950. Main Street had old storefronts, a town square with a gazebo, and exactly 3 traffic lights. The clock tower was impossible to miss. It rose 5 stories above the surrounding buildings, built from dark red brick with ornate stonework around the windows.
If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this.
At the top, a massive clock face stared out over the town, its hands frozen at 3:47. Elena's breath caught. 3:47, the exact time all her clocks had stopped. She parked across the street and sat staring up at it. Lily pressed her face against the window. "Mama, it's like a castle. It's a clock tower, baby. Can we live in a clock tower?" Before Elena could answer, an elderly man approached her window. He was in his 70s, wearing a three-piece suit despite the November cold, carrying a leather briefcase that looked older than Elena. "Ms. Reeves?" he asked. Elena got out of the car. "Mr. Morrison?" "Indeed." He shook her hand firmly. "And this must be young Lily." Lily climbed out, staring up at the tower with wide eyes. "Why did the clock stop?" "Excellent question." Morrison smiled. "The mechanism broke in 1994. Your great-uncle tried to have it repaired several times, but the parts were too specialized. Eventually, he simply closed the tower and let it stand as it was." "Why didn't he sell it?" Elena asked. "He was quite adamant it should stay in the family. He believed it held something important, though he never specified what." Morrison pulled out a set of keys. "Shall we look inside?" The front door was heavy oak, reinforced with iron bands. Morrison unlocked 3 separate locks before it swung inward with a groan that echoed through the empty street. Inside, the air smelled of dust and oil and something else, something metallic Elena couldn't quite identify. The ground floor was a large circular room with a stone floor and brick walls. A spiral staircase wound upward along the curved wall, disappearing into darkness above. The first floor was originally a watchmaker's shop, Morrison explained. "Your family business, back in the day. The Bancrofts were renowned clockmakers. The 2nd through 4th floors were living quarters. And the 5th floor houses the clock mechanism itself." Elena walked slowly around the room. Despite the dust and neglect, she could see the quality of the construction. The stonework was flawless. The windows, though dirty, were intact. The wooden details carved with precision. "Can we go upstairs?" Lily asked. "Carefully," Morrison said. "The stairs are solid, but watch your step." They climbed together, their footsteps echoing in the enclosed space. The 2nd floor opened into what had once been a living area, now empty except for a few pieces of furniture draped in dusty sheets. The 3rd floor held bedrooms, their doors standing open to reveal iron bed frames and faded wallpaper. The 4th floor was different. Instead of living spaces, it contained what looked like a workshop, filled with tools and parts, gears of various sizes scattered across workbenches. Springs and wheels and components Elena didn't recognize. Everything was covered in decades of dust, frozen in time like the clock itself. "Your great-uncle worked here until his health declined," Morrison said. "He was trying to repair the mechanism." "Why was it so important?" Elena asked. "The Bancroft clock was famous in its day. It was considered a masterwork of precision engineering. When it stopped, something significant was lost." They reached the 5th floor, and Elena stopped breathing. The room was massive, taking up the entire top floor of the tower. And dominating the space, filling it almost completely, was the clock mechanism, a marvel of brass and iron and intricate gears, some as small as coins, others as large as wagon wheels. Everything interconnected, precise, beautiful even in its stillness. Lily walked toward it slowly, her small hand reaching out to touch one of the frozen gears. "Don't," Morrison said quickly. "Some of these parts are quite sharp, and the mechanism is delicate despite its size." Elena circled the mechanism, trying to understand what she was looking at. This wasn't just a clock. This was art, engineering, obsession built into metal and time. "How does it work?" she asked. "I'm not entirely certain," Morrison admitted. "Your great-uncle was the last person who truly understood it. He left detailed journals documenting the mechanism, but they're written in technical language I don't fully comprehend." Elena noticed something odd. In the center of the mechanism, accessible through a narrow gap between the gears, was what looked like a door. Small, made of brass, with an ornate lock. "What's that?" she asked, pointing. Morrison followed her gaze. "I'm not sure. I've never noticed it before, but then I've only been up here once, when Theodore passed and I had to inventory the property." Elena squeezed between two large gears, careful not to touch anything, and examined the door more closely. It was about 2 feet square, set into the floor beneath the mechanism. The brass was tarnished but intact, and carved into the surface was a single word: foundation. "Mr. Morrison," Elena said slowly. "What's beneath this floor?" "Nothing as far as I know. The tower sits on a solid stone foundation." "Then why is there a door labeled foundation?" Morrison came closer, peering at it with interest. "I have no idea. But if there's something beyond that door, it would be yours now. The entire property is yours, including any contents." Elena pulled the key ring from her pocket, the one Morrison had given her. Dozens of keys, all labeled in tiny handwriting. She found one that read, "Mechanism Room." She tried it in the lock. It didn't fit. She tried another labeled "Workshop." Nothing. Then she saw one at the very end of the ring, unlabeled, different from the others. Older, made of brass instead of steel, ornate and unusual. She slid it into the lock. It fit perfectly. "Wait," Morrison said. "Perhaps we should be cautious." But Elena had already turned the key. The lock clicked. The brass door swung inward, revealing not a room but a ladder descending into darkness. Cold air rushed up, carrying with it the scent of oil and metal and something else, something that made Elena's heart race. "There's a space down there," she whispered. "A basement?" Morrison looked perplexed. "That's impossible. The tower blueprints show no basement." "Maybe the blueprints are wrong." Elena pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight. She aimed it down the shaft, but the beam didn't reach the bottom. "How deep is this?" "Only one way to find out," Lily said, already climbing toward the opening. "Lily, no. Mama, we have to see." Elena looked at Morrison, who appeared torn between professional caution and genuine curiosity. "I suppose," he said slowly, "as the owner of the property, you have every right to explore it. But perhaps I should go first, just to ensure it's safe." "I'm going," Elena said. Something about that cold air rising from below called to her, promised answers to questions she didn't even know she was asking. She swung her legs into the opening and found the first rung of the ladder. Metal, solid, recently used based on the lack of rust. Someone had been down here, and not that long ago. She descended slowly, testing each rung before trusting her weight to it. Morrison followed, then Lily, who climbed like she'd been doing this her whole life. Elena counted the rungs. 20. 30. 40. They descended at least 30 feet before her foot finally touched solid ground. She stepped off the ladder and swept her phone's flashlight around, trying to understand what she was seeing. They stood in a circular chamber carved from solid stone, roughly the same diameter as the tower above but completely hidden beneath it. The walls were lined with metal shelving, and on those shelves, arranged with precise care, were boxes. Hundreds of boxes, all identical, all labeled with numbers but no other description. In the center of the chamber sat a desk, and on that desk lay a leather journal. Morrison and Lily reached the bottom and stood beside her, all three of them staring in silence. "What is this place?" Elena whispered. Morrison walked slowly to the nearest shelf and opened one of the boxes. Inside, wrapped in protective cloth, was a pocket watch. He lifted it carefully, and even in the dim light, Elena could see the quality of the craftsmanship. The case was gold, engraved with intricate patterns. When Morrison pressed the button to open it, the inside revealed a movement of breathtaking complexity. "This is a Bancroft original," he breathed. "From the 1890s, by the look of it. These watches are extremely rare, extremely valuable." "How valuable?" Elena asked. "This one watch? perhaps $50,000 at auction. Maybe more to the right collector. Elena's legs went weak. She opened the nearest box on her shelf. Another watch, this one silver with a blue enamel face. She opened another. A gold chronograph with multiple complications. Another. A lady's watch set with what looked like real diamonds. There are hundreds of them, she said. Hundreds of these boxes. Not just watches, Morrison said. He'd moved to another shelf. Look. Clock movements. Rare parts. Mechanisms I don't even recognize. His hands shook as he set down the watch he was holding. Ms. Reeves, your great-uncle didn't just inherit a clock tower. He inherited the entire Bancroft collection. Everything they made over 100 years, all preserved, all hidden here. Elena picked up the journal from the desk and opened it to the first page. The handwriting was shaky but legible. My name is Theodore Bancroft, it began. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're my heir, which means your family, even if we never met. What you found here is more than a collection. It's a legacy. The Bancroft family built their reputation on precision and beauty. Every piece in this vault represents years of work, generations of skill passed down from master to apprentice. I've spent my life protecting this collection, waiting for the right person to inherit it. Someone who would understand its value not just in money but in art, in history, in the preservation of craftsmanship that's dying in this modern world. The watches and mechanisms you see here are worth millions. I've had them appraised over the years, quietly, carefully. The last estimate was $397 million, though that was 5 years ago. The value has likely increased. But I couldn't sell them. I couldn't break up the collection. It needed to stay together, needed to be protected until someone came along who would know what to do with it. I chose you, Elena, because your mother once told me about you when you were just a child. She said you loved puzzles, loved understanding how things worked. She said you had your grandfather's hands, steady and precise. I hope she was right. I hope you're reading this with wonder instead of greed. And I hope you'll do what I couldn't bring myself to do, share this collection with the world. Elena's hands trembled so badly she nearly dropped the journal. $397 million. The words swam in front of her eyes. She read them again, certain she'd misunderstood. Mama? Lily's voice seemed to come from very far away. Are we rich now? Morrison had gone pale. He'd found the appraisal documents, professionally bound, sitting in a locked cabinet Elena hadn't even noticed. These are authenticated, he said hoarsely. Every piece catalogued, photographed, valued by experts from Sotheby's and Christie's. This is legitimate. Elena sat down hard on the stone floor, the journal open in her lap. This wasn't happening. Couldn't be happening. She was supposed to be living in her car, trying to figure out how to feed her daughter on food stamps and tips from a diner. She wasn't supposed to be standing in a hidden vault beneath a clock tower, surrounded by nearly $400 million in antique timepieces. I need air, she said. I need to get out of here. She climbed the ladder with Lily right behind her, Morrison following more slowly. They emerged back into the mechanism room, and Elena pushed through to one of the tall windows, forcing it open to breathe in the November cold. The town spread out below them. Quiet streets, small shops, ordinary people going about their ordinary Friday afternoon. None of them knowing that directly above their heads, a woman who'd been evicted that morning had just inherited a fortune that would change everything. Morrison climbed out of the mechanism room looking like he'd aged 10 years. Ms. Reeves, we need to discuss this. We need to contact authorities, have the collection officially appraised, determine tax implications. How much would I owe in taxes? Estate taxes on an inheritance of this size? Approximately 40% of the total value. Elena did the math, her bookkeeper's brain working automatically. 40% of $397 million was about $160 million. Which would leave her with roughly $237 million. Still an impossible number, still more money than she could comprehend. And if I don't report it, she asked. Morrison's eyebrows rose. That would be tax evasion, a federal crime. I strongly advise against that course of action. But nobody knows it exists except us. Ms. Reeves. Morrison's voice was firm. Your great-uncle spent his entire life paralyzed by fear of what would happen if this collection came to light. He died alone in a nursing home, having never enjoyed a penny of what he'd inherited, never shared the beauty of these pieces with anyone. Don't make his mistake. Elena turned to look at Lily, who was sitting on the floor beside the mechanism, running her small fingers along one of the frozen gears. What would you do? Elena asked Morrison. He was quiet for a long moment. I'd find a way to honor both the collection and your needs. Perhaps establish a foundation, similar to a museum. Keep the pieces together, share them with the public, but structure it legally so you can draw a reasonable salary as director. You'd still need to pay estate taxes, but you could potentially reduce your tax burden significantly by donating portions to museums or establishing the collection as a public benefit. How long would that take? To set up properly? 6 months to a year. I don't have a year. I don't have 6 months. I have a car full of garbage bags and less than $100 in my bank account. Morrison studied her. May I ask what happened? So Elena told him. About Robert leaving, about the child support that never came, about working 3 jobs that still weren't enough. About the eviction notice and the choice between feeding her daughter and paying rent. About sleeping in her car last night because she had nowhere else to go. When she finished, Morrison was quiet. Then he said, the tower has running water. The electricity is still connected. Your great-uncle paid all utilities automatically from a trust fund. It's not luxurious, but the second floor could be made livable with some basic cleaning. You're saying I could live here? You own it. The property taxes are paid through the end of the year. After that, they're approximately $8,000 annually. But if you're managing a collection valued at $397 million, I suspect you could find a way to cover that. Elena looked around the mechanism room, at the workshop 1 floor below, at the empty bedrooms. She thought about Lily sleeping in the back seat of their car versus sleeping in an actual bed. She thought about the vault below filled with treasures that were now technically hers. We'll stay, she said. While I figure this out. Morrison nodded slowly. I'll begin the paperwork to formally transfer the deed. And Ms. Reeves? I'd advise discretion. Don't tell people about the collection until we have a legal plan in place. The moment word gets out, you'll be dealing with tax authorities, treasure hunters, thieves, and lawsuits from people claiming they have rights to various pieces. Who else knows about this? Just us, as far as I'm aware. Your great-uncle was very secretive. He had the collection appraised by bringing in experts one at a time, showing them individual pieces, never revealing the scope of what he had. Then nobody knows. Not yet. That night, Elena and Lily slept on air mattresses on the second floor, surrounded by dusty furniture and the constant ticking that wasn't really there, phantom sounds from clocks that had stopped decades ago. Elena lay awake long after Lily fell asleep, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything that had changed in a single day. Yesterday, she'd been evicted. Today, she owned a clock tower and a fortune she couldn't even conceptualize. The whiplash was making her dizzy. She pulled out her phone and researched Bancroft watches. The results were scattered but impressive. Articles about their craftsmanship, their rarity, auction records showing individual pieces selling for tens of thousands. The Bancroft name carried weight in collector circles, represented quality and artistry that modern manufacturing couldn't replicate. $397 million. The number kept echoing in her mind. Even after taxes, even after setting up whatever legal structures Morrison recommended, she'd have more money than she could spend in multiple lifetimes. Lily would never have to worry about college tuition, about medical bills, about any of the things that had defined Elena's own anxious existence. But she also knew Morrison was right. The moment this became public, her life would become chaos. lawyers and accountants and government investigators and people claiming they deserved a piece of what her great-uncle had built. She needed to be smart. Needed to protect herself and Lily. Needed to honor Theodore's wish that the collection stay together while also ensuring they had security. The next morning, Elena woke to sunlight streaming through the tall windows and the sound of Lily laughing. She found her daughter on the fourth floor, the workshop level, examining tools with the focused intensity she usually reserved for puzzles. "Mama, look. These are for making tiny screws. And these are for cutting gears. And this whole table is for polishing metal." Elena walked through the workshop with fresh eyes. It was like stepping into a different century, a place where craftsmanship mattered more than speed, where perfection was the only acceptable standard. She picked up one of the half-finished watch movements sitting on a bench, marveled at the precision of its parts, each piece hand-filed to fit exactly. "Your great-great-grandfather made these," she told Lily. "And his father before him. It's our family history. Will you make watches?" "I don't know how." "We could learn." Lily picked up a magnifying glass, the kind watchmakers used, and held it to her eye. "We could fix the big clock. Make it work again." Elena looked up at the ceiling, imagining the mechanism above them coming back to life. The idea was impossible, ridiculous. She was a bookkeeper who waited tables, not a clockmaker. She didn't know the first thing about gears and mainsprings and escapements. But she'd also just inherited a fortune in antique timepieces. Perhaps it was time to learn. She spent the day cleaning the second floor, making it livable. She found sheets and blankets in a storage closet, all neatly folded and preserved in plastic. Theodore had prepared this space, she realized. Had kept it ready for whenever his heir arrived. Morrison came by in the late afternoon with paperwork. "I've filed the deed transfer," he said. "The clock tower is officially yours. I've also reached out discreetly to a tax attorney I trust. Someone who specializes in high-value estates and charitable foundations. I think you should meet with her before making any decisions." "How much will that cost?" "Her consultation fee is $500 per hour." Elena's stomach dropped. That was more than she made in a week. Morrison must have seen her expression because he added gently, "Ms. Reeves, you own a collection worth nearly $400 million. You can afford a few hours with a good attorney. In fact, you can't afford not to hire one." He was right. She knew he was right. But the whiplash between poverty and wealth was making it hard to think clearly. Just yesterday she'd been counting change for gas money. Now she was supposed to hire $500 an hour lawyers like it was nothing. "Set up the meeting," she said. Over the next week, Elena began the strange work of living two lives simultaneously. By day, she cleaned the tower, made the living spaces habitable, and enrolled Lily in the local elementary school. By night, she descended into the vault and cataloged what she'd inherited, photographing each piece, checking it against Theodore's detailed journals. The collection was even more extensive than she'd first realized. Over 800 watches, hundreds of clock movements, thousands of individual parts, and tools, some of them probably worth more than the watches themselves. Everything Theodore had inherited, everything the Bancroft family had created over more than a century, all preserved with obsessive care. She found more journals too, older ones, going back to the 1800s. Theodore's grandfather writing about the craft, about the philosophy behind their work. "A watch is more than a machine for telling time," one entry read. "It's a promise. A promise that precision matters, that beauty matters, that human hands can create something perfect." Elena photographed everything, created spreadsheets, built databases. Her bookkeeping skills proved unexpectedly useful. By the end of the week, she had a complete inventory of every item in the vault, cross-referenced with Theodore's appraisals, organized by era and type and estimated value. The tax attorney, a woman named Patricia Chen who'd driven up from the city, spent 3 hours reviewing Elena's documentation. When she finally looked up from her laptop, her expression was serious but not unkind. "You have 3 realistic options," Patricia said. "Option 1, report the full inheritance, pay approximately $160 million in estate taxes, and keep the remaining $237 million. You'd be immediately wealthy but would face scrutiny from various government agencies who'd want to verify everything. Option 2, establish the collection as a museum under a non-profit foundation. You'd donate the majority of pieces to the foundation, which would make them tax-deductible. The foundation would pay you a reasonable salary as director, perhaps $200,000 to $300,000 annually. You'd give up access to the full value but would maintain control and have steady income. Option 3, and this is the one I'd recommend, a hybrid approach. Sell a carefully selected portion of the collection, perhaps 10% of the most valuable pieces. That would net you approximately $40 million. Pay estate taxes on that amount, leaving you with about $24 million after taxes. Then establish the remaining 90% as a museum foundation, which would protect the collection and provide you with salary and benefits. Elena did the math. $24 million. Even after taxes, lawyer fees, and setting aside money for emergencies, she'd have more than enough to live comfortably for the rest of her life. And the foundation would ensure the collection stayed together, honored Theodore's wishes. How long would this take? Elena asked. If we move quickly. 3 to 4 months to identify which pieces to sell, find the right buyers, establish the foundation, and navigate the legal requirements. And in the meantime? In the meantime, you tell no one about what you have. You live quietly in the tower, maintain the collection, and let me handle the legal work. Elena agreed. What choice did she have? The town of Millbrook slowly began to notice that someone was living in the old Bancroft Tower. Elena would see people pointing as she walked Lily to school, hear whispered conversations that stopped when she entered the grocery store. But most people were friendly enough. Small-town curiosity, not hostility. Until Richard Ashworth showed up. He arrived on a Thursday afternoon, driving a BMW that looked out of place on Millbrook's modest streets. He was in his 50s, wearing an expensive suit, and he didn't bother with pleasantries. "You're Elena Reeves?" he asked when she answered the tower door. "Yes. I'm Richard Ashworth. I represent the Ashworth Collection, one of the premier antique timepiece museums in the world. I understand you've inherited the Bancroft Tower." Elena's instincts screamed warning. "How did you know that?" "Property transfers are public record. And the Bancroft name carries significant weight in collector circles. I'm here to make you an offer. I'm not selling. You haven't heard my offer yet. $5 million for the tower and its contents." Elena almost laughed. He was offering $5 million for a property that contained nearly $400 million in watches. Either he didn't know about the vault or he was hoping she didn't. "Not interested," she said. His expression hardened. "Ms. Reeves, I don't think you understand the position you're in. The Bancroft Collection is famous. If pieces from it suddenly appeared on the market, there would be questions. Questions about provenance, about whether you have legal right to sell them, about tax implications. I'm offering you a clean sale, no questions asked. And I'm telling you the property isn't for sale. Please leave. You're making a mistake. I have connections, resources. I could make things very difficult for you." Elena felt fear spike through her, but she kept her voice steady. "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning. Think about my offer." He pulled out a business card and held it out. When she didn't take it, he dropped it on the doorstep. "You have my number. Call me when you're ready to be reasonable." He walked back to his BMW and drove away, leaving Elena shaking in the doorway. That night, she called Patricia. "Someone knows. A collector came by, offered to buy the tower. He mentioned the Bancroft Collection specifically. Did you tell him anything?" "No. But he knows, or suspects. He's threatening to cause problems." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. Once word spreads that there might be a significant collection, you'll have dealers and collectors coming out of the woodwork. Some will try to buy pieces. Others will try to intimidate you into selling below value. A few might try more aggressive tactics. What do I do? Document everything. If he contacts you again, record the conversation if you're legally allowed to. Don't engage with anyone else who approaches you about the collection. And let me accelerate our timeline. I'll start identifying pieces to sell immediately. Elena lay awake that night, listening to the phantom ticking of stopped clocks, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake by staying in Millbrook. But where else could she go? This tower was the only home she had now, the only security she could give Lily. Over the next few weeks, more people approached her. A dealer from New York who claimed to be a friend of Theodore's. A woman who insisted her grandmother had sold a watch to the Bancrofts in 1947 and wanted it back. A local man who said the tower rightfully belonged to the town, not to some outsider. Elena documented everything, shared nothing, and waited for Patricia's legal framework to come together. But it was Lily who made the discovery that changed everything. She'd been exploring the mechanism room, fascinated by the frozen gears, when she noticed something strange. One of the larger gears had markings on it, numbers that didn't seem to relate to the timekeeping function. "Mama, look," she called down. "This gear has a code on it." Elena climbed up to see. Lily was right. Engraved into the brass were numbers, 3-47-18-89. "What does it mean?" Lily asked. Elena pulled out her phone and searched for dates. 1889 was when the tower was built. But 3 to 47? The clock stopped at 3:47, Lily pointed out. And 18? They stared at the numbers, puzzling over them. Then Elena remembered something from Theodore's journals. She ran down to their living space and grabbed the oldest journal she'd found, the one from 1889. She flipped through until she found an entry dated March 18, 1889. "Today we installed the final piece of the mechanism," it read. "The master gear, which will control all other movements. I've encoded within it the location of our greatest work, the Bancroft Celestial. Only those who understand our family's dedication to precision will find it." Elena's hands shook. "There's something else hidden here. Something called the Bancroft Celestial." She spent the next hour searching through all of Theodore's journals, looking for any mention of the Celestial. She found it finally in a journal from 1920. The Celestial was Father's masterwork, it read. A pocket watch of such complexity that no modern craftsman could replicate it. It took him 20 years to build. 367 individual parts, all handmade, all perfectly calibrated. It doesn't just tell time. It shows the movement of planets, the phases of the moon, the position of stars. It's worth more than everything else in the collection combined. Father hid it before he died, said only the worthiest heir would find it. I've searched for 40 years. I've never found it. But I know it's here, somewhere in the mechanism, waiting. Elena looked up at the frozen gears towering above her. Somewhere in this machine, hidden for over 100 years, was a watch worth potentially tens of millions of dollars on its own. "We need to get the mechanism working," she said. "Can we?" Lily asked. "I don't know. But we can try." Elena called Morrison, explained what she'd found. He was silent for a long moment. "Ms. Reeves, I need to tell you something. Your great-uncle spent the last 30 years of his life trying to repair that mechanism. He was convinced the Celestial was hidden within it, that it would only be revealed when the clock ran again. He died believing he'd failed. Do you think he was right? That the watch is really there? Theodore wasn't given to delusions. If he believed it existed, I'd trust his judgment. But fixing that mechanism? It would require expertise we don't have access to. Then we'll learn." Elena threw herself into studying clockwork. She ordered books on horology, watched online videos about gear ratios and escapements, taught herself the language of mechanical timekeeping. Lily helped, her young hands more nimble than Elena's, her patience seemingly endless. They started small, repairing pocket watches from the collection to practice their skills. Elena would study Theodore's journals, follow his detailed instructions, and slowly, painfully, begin to understand the precision required. Their first successful repair was a simple pocket watch from 1895. When Elena wound it and heard it tick to life for the first time in decades, she cried. "You did it, Mama," Lily whispered. "We did it," Elena corrected. Word of their work spread, somehow. Elena started receiving emails from collectors, museums, scholars. Everyone wanted to know if the rumors were true, if the Bancroft collection still existed, if pieces were for sale. Patricia advised her to ignore them all. "We're close," she said during one of their phone calls. "I've identified buyers for several high-value pieces. Private collectors willing to pay premium prices for authenticated Bancroft works. We're looking at approximately $45 million from the sale, which is more than we projected." "When?" Elena asked. 6 weeks. Maybe less. Then we'll pay the taxes, establish the foundation, and you'll be secure. Elena held onto that timeline like a lifeline. 6 weeks. She could survive 6 more weeks of people approaching her, of Richard Ashworth calling with progressively more aggressive offers, of feeling like she was guarding a secret too big to contain. She and Lily continued working on the mechanism. They'd progressed to larger repairs, fixing some of the smaller gears, cleaning and oiling parts that hadn't moved in 30 years. Elena still didn't fully understand how it all worked together, but she was learning, piece by piece, gear by gear. Late one night, while Lily slept, Elena stood alone in the mechanism room, studying the master gear with its encoded numbers. 3-47-18-89, March 18, 1889, the day the mechanism was completed. She pulled out her phone and checked the date. It was March 17, tomorrow would be the anniversary. An idea struck her. She grabbed Theodore's journals and searched for any entry from March 18, any year. She found dozens of them. Theodore had made a note every year on that date, treating it like a holiday. Most entries were simple, March 18. Another year the clock stands silent. Another year searching. But one entry, from 5 years ago, was different. March 18. I had a dream last night. Father showed me how to find the celestial. It's not hidden in the mechanism. It is the mechanism. The watch doesn't reveal itself when the clock runs. The clock runs when someone understands the watch. The watch is the mechanism. Elena read it 3 times. The clock runs when someone understands the watch. She looked up at the frozen gears and suddenly saw them differently. Not as separate pieces working together, but as one massive watch, each gear an individual part of a single enormous timepiece. And if it was a watch, then somewhere it had a mainspring, a source of power that had been wound down, depleted, forgotten. She grabbed her flashlight and began searching. Not for hidden compartments, but for the heart of the mechanism. The largest gear, the one that would hold the spring providing power to everything else. She found it behind a panel of decorative brass she thought was just ornamentation. The panel had screws, tiny ones, nearly invisible. She removed them carefully and the panel swung open, revealing a space about 2 feet square. Inside was a mainspring barrel, larger than any she'd seen in the pocket watches. And attached to the barrel was a key, ornate and beautiful, made to wind the spring. Elena's hands trembled as she reached for it. The key was stuck at first, frozen from decades of inactivity. But she applied gentle pressure, rocking it back and forth, and slowly it began to turn. 1 complete rotation. 2. 3. Nothing happened. She kept winding. 10 rotations. 20. The spring was taking an enormous amount of turns, more power than she'd imagined would be needed. 30 rotations. 40. She felt resistance building, the spring reaching its tension limit. She gave it one more turn, as tight as it would go, and stepped back. For a moment, nothing happened. The mechanism remained frozen, silent, dead as it had been for 30 years. Then, somewhere deep in the mass of gears, something clicked. A small gear began to turn. Then another. The movement spread through the mechanism like a wave, each gear engaging its neighbor, the motion building, accelerating. The great clock began to tick. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a steady, precise tick-tick-tick, the sound of perfect engineering coming back to life. Elena stood frozen, watching the gears turn, unable to process what she'd just done. She'd restored the Bancroft clock. The mechanism that had stood silent for 3 decades was running again. And as it ran, something else happened. The master gear, the one with the encoded numbers, began to rotate. As it turned, a section of the floor beneath it split apart, revealing a compartment Elena had never seen, never suspected existed. Inside the compartment, resting on velvet, was a pocket watch. But not just any pocket watch. This was the Bancroft Celestial, and even in the dim light of her flashlight, it was breathtaking. The case was platinum, engraved with constellations, set with tiny diamonds marking the positions of stars. The face was impossibly complex, showing not just time but the movements of celestial bodies, phases of the moon, positions of planets against the zodiac. Elena picked it up with trembling hands. It was heavier than she'd expected, substantial, real. She turned it over and found an inscription on the back. To those who understand that time is not just measured, but honored. The Bancroft Celestial. Completed 1889. She pressed the button to open the case and stared at the movement inside. It was art and engineering made physical, 367 pieces working in perfect harmony. Each component hand-filed, hand-finished, polished to a mirror shine that reflected her face back at her. This wasn't just the most valuable watch in the collection. This was the heart of everything the Bancroft family had built, the proof that human hands could create something approaching perfection. Elena carried it down to the second floor, where Lily was sleeping. She sat in the window watching the town of Millbrook sleep below, holding the Celestial in her hands, feeling its weight, its importance. In 6 weeks, she'd sell selected pieces from the collection. She'd establish the foundation. She'd secure their future. But this watch, she decided, would never be sold. This would stay with them, a reminder of where they'd come from, of the legacy she was now responsible for protecting. The Bancroft Celestial would remain in the family. In the morning, Lily woke to find her mother still sitting by the window, the watch in her lap. "Is that it?" Lily asked. "The special watch?" "This is it. Can I hold it?" Elena handed it to her carefully. Lily examined it with the same focused intensity she brought to everything, turning it over, studying the engravings, the complications, the precision. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It is. Are we going to keep it?" "Yes. This one stays with us. Always." "Good." Lily handed it back. "It belongs to us. Like the tower." Elena hugged her daughter tightly. Like the tower. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur. Patricia orchestrated the sale of selected pieces to carefully vetted collectors. The money came through, $47 million, more than they'd projected. After estate taxes and legal fees, Elena netted $26 million. $26 million. The number still didn't feel real. She paid off every debt she'd ever had. She set up a trust for Lily, $10 million invested conservatively to fund her education and future. She put aside $5 million for emergencies and unexpected expenses. The remaining $11 million went into a combination of savings and investments that would provide steady income. The Bancroft Foundation was established with the remaining pieces from the collection, approximately 720 watches and movements valued at $350 million. Elena was named director with an annual salary of $250,000, more money than she'd ever imagined earning. The tower became the foundation's headquarters. The third floor was converted into a museum space where rotating exhibits would display pieces from the collection. The fourth floor remained a workshop where Elena and Lily continued to practice their craft, repairing pieces, learning the skills Theodore had spent his life mastering. Richard Ashworth tried one more time to pressure Elena into selling to him. He showed up with a lawyer, threatening legal action over some dubious claim about his great-grandfather having partial ownership of the collection. Patricia shut him down so thoroughly that he left town and never came back. The foundation's grand opening was scheduled for October, exactly 1 year after Theodore's death. Elena spent months preparing, working with Patricia and Morrison and a board of advisors they'd carefully selected. The event would be invitation only, limited to serious collectors and museum representatives, a chance to see the collection and understand its scope. The night before the opening, Elena stood in the mechanism room watching the clock run. Its gears turned with perfect precision, keeping time that could be trusted, creating rhythm in the chaos. The Celestial sat in its special case in the museum space below, the centerpiece of an exhibit titled The Art of Time. Lily found her there. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" "I think so. Are you?" "I'm excited. I get to show people what we do, what our family made." "Our family." The words made Elena's throat tight. A year ago, she hadn't even known the Bancrofts existed. Now their legacy was her responsibility, their art her inheritance, their precision her passion. "Great-Uncle Theodore would be proud of us," Lily said. "We found the Celestial. We made the clock work again. We're sharing the collection like he wanted." "We did it together," Elena said. "All of it." The opening was a success. Collectors and curators came from around the world, walking through the exhibits with expressions of wonder, examining pieces they'd only read about, seeing craftsmanship that no longer existed in the modern world. The Bancroft Celestial drew crowds, even among people who understood watches and had seen magnificent pieces before. The complexity, the artistry, the sheer ambition of it overwhelmed them. "I've never seen anything like it," one curator whispered to Elena. "This is the finest example of 19th-century American horology in existence." "How much is it worth?" someone else asked. Elena had wondered that herself. Patricia had consulted with experts, and the estimates ranged wildly. Some said $50 million. Others thought $75 million or more. A few believed it was priceless, too significant to put a number on. "It's not for sale," Elena said simply. "It stays with the foundation. Always." Over the next year, the Bancroft Foundation grew. They developed educational programs teaching watchmaking to young people. They offered apprenticeships to aspiring horologists. They partnered with universities on research into precision engineering and mechanical design. Elena discovered she had a talent for running the foundation, for balancing the need to protect the collection with the mission to share it. Her bookkeeping background proved invaluable. Her newfound understanding of clockwork gave her credibility. In her story, the broke single mother who'd inherited a fortune and chose to honor rather than exploit it, resonated with people. Articles were written about her. Interviews requested. But Elena kept their actual life private. She and Lily still lived on the second floor of the tower. They still shopped at the same grocery store. Lily still attended Millbrook Elementary. The only difference was that Elena no longer worried about money, no longer lay awake doing impossible math, no longer feared that one emergency would destroy everything. 2 years after inheriting the tower, Elena received a letter from Robert's lawyer. Her ex-husband had heard about the foundation, had seen articles about the collection's value, and was demanding a portion of what he called marital assets. Patricia's response was swift and brutal. The inheritance had come after the divorce. Robert had no claim to any of it. Furthermore, he owed over $40,000 in back child support. If he wished to pursue legal action, the foundation would countersue for the full amount plus interest and legal fees. Robert's lawyer withdrew the claim immediately. That night, Elena sat with Lily on the floor of the mechanism room, listening to the clock tick overhead. "Are you okay?" Lily asked. "About Daddy trying to take our stuff?" "I'm fine, baby. He can't hurt us anymore. We're protected. Because of the tower. Because we took care of each other. Because we didn't give up even when things were hard. The tower helped, but we saved ourselves." Lily leaned against her mother's side. "I like our life now. Me too. But Mama? I liked our life before too. Even when we were poor. Even when we lived in the car that one night. Because we were together. Elena pulled her daughter close, tears sliding down her face. You're wiser than I ever was at 7. I'm 9 now. Even wiser then. 5 years after inheriting the tower, Elena stood at a podium in front of the International Horology Society, accepting an award for her work preserving the Bancroft collection. Museum directors and collectors filled the room, applauding her dedication to maintaining the collection's integrity rather than selling it piecemeal for profit. But what Elena thought about, looking out at those faces, was the night she'd received the eviction notice. The absolute certainty that she'd failed, that she couldn't provide for her daughter, that the world was crushing her under the weight of bills she couldn't pay. If someone had told her that in 5 years she'd be running a foundation, that she'd have financial security and professional respect and a daughter who was thriving, she wouldn't have believed them. The distance between those two versions of herself was too great, the transformation too complete. But it had happened, one day at a time, one decision at a time, one small act of courage building on the last until she'd become someone she barely recognized. Someone strong. Someone capable. Someone who'd honored a legacy while building her own. After the ceremony, she flew home to Millbrook. The clock tower stood exactly where it had always been, a landmark now, famous in collector circles, but still fundamentally the same building. She climbed the stairs to their living space and found Lily at the kitchen table doing homework. How was the trip? Lily asked without looking up from her math. Long boring speeches. But they gave me a fancy award. Can I see it? Elena pulled the crystal trophy from her bag. Lily examined it briefly, nodded approval, and went back to her homework. The casualness of it made Elena smile. To Lily, awards and recognition were nice but not essential. What mattered was being home, having stability, knowing they were safe. That night, Elena descended into the vault for the first time in months. She walked among the shelves, running her fingers along the boxes, thinking about the watches inside, each one a small miracle of human achievement. So much beauty preserved, so much history protected. But what struck her most was how the vault no longer felt like a curse or a burden. It felt like responsibility, which was different. Curses trap you. Responsibilities give you purpose. Theodore had been trapped by his fear, paralyzed by the weight of what he'd inherited. Elena had chosen a different path. She'd claimed the inheritance, accepted its challenges, and transformed it into something meaningful. She climbed back to the surface and stood in the mechanism room, watching the great clock tick away the seconds. The sound was so familiar now that she barely noticed it, but tonight she listened carefully, heard the precision in each tick, the promise that time could be measured, trusted, honored. The Bancroft clock would keep running long after she was gone. The collection would outlive her, would be passed on to Lily and whoever came after. The foundation would continue its work, teaching new generations to appreciate craftsmanship and precision and the art of measuring time. But Elena's legacy wasn't just the foundation or the collection. It was the choice she'd made when she could have walked away, when hiding or selling out would have been easier. She'd chosen to honor what came before while building something new. She'd chosen to be brave when being afraid would have been simpler. And that choice had saved her. 8 years after inheriting the tower, Elena stood on the 5th floor with Lily, now 15, teaching her to maintain the mechanism. Lily had inherited her mother's precise hands, had surpassed her in understanding the intricate relationships between gears and springs. She could take apart a pocket watch and reassemble it blindfolded, could identify a watch's era and maker just by its movement. You're better at this than I ever was, Elena admitted, watching her daughter oil a delicate gear with perfect precision. You taught me everything. I taught you the basics. The rest was in you already. The Bancroft gift. Lily smiled. Do you think Great Uncle Theodore knew that I'd be good at this? I think he hoped. I think that's why he left everything to us. Not just the collection, but the chance to continue the legacy. Are you glad he did? Elena thought about the question. 8 years ago, standing with an eviction notice in one hand and a letter about an inheritance in the other, she'd had no idea what she was accepting. The stress, the challenges, the weight of managing something so valuable. But also the security, the purpose, the satisfaction of protecting something beautiful. Yes, she said finally. I'm glad. Even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts. They made me who I am now. Who's that? Someone who knows that clocks stop for a reason. So we can wind them again. So we can choose when to start moving forward. Lily set down the oil can and wiped her hands. That's actually pretty wise, Mom. Sometimes I surprise myself. They stood together, mother and daughter, looking out over the town of Millbrook through the tall windows. The afternoon sun caught the clock face, making it shine like gold. Below them, the mechanism ticked with perfect rhythm, measuring time that belonged to everyone and no one, constant as heartbeat, precise as breath. Elena had arrived in this town with nothing but a car full of garbage bags and a daughter to protect. She'd found a tower full of treasures, yes, but more importantly, she'd found herself. Found strength she didn't know she had. Found purpose in protecting beauty. Found peace in accepting responsibility. The Bancroft legacy was hers now. The clocks had stopped, and she'd wound them again. The collection had been hidden, and she'd brought it into the light. The tower had stood silent, and she'd filled it with life. But the greatest treasure wasn't in the vault below or in the celestial resting in its case or in the $26 million that had given her security. The greatest treasure was standing beside her, growing strong and capable and kind, carrying the legacy forward into whatever future waited beyond these walls. Come on, Elena said, putting her arm around Lily's shoulders. Let's go make dinner. I'm teaching you my grandmother's recipe tonight. The one with the really complicated timing? Precision matters in cooking too. They descended the spiral stairs together, leaving the mechanism to its eternal work, measuring time with precision that outlasted human concerns, human fears, human dreams. The clock would keep ticking through nights and days, through seasons and years, through generations yet to come. And when people asked Elena how she'd gone from broke and desperate to running one of the world's most significant horological collections, she'd tell them the truth. She'd been given a gift by someone who believed in her before she believed in herself. And she'd honored that gift by choosing to be brave enough to claim it, strong enough to protect it, and wise enough to share it. Because that's what legacies are for. Not to be hoarded in the dark, but to be brought into the light where they can inspire others to believe that transformation is possible, that broken things can be fixed, that stopped clocks can tick again if someone is willing to wind them. The Bancroft Clock Tower stood on its corner in Millbrook, a monument to precision and beauty in the belief that human hands can create something approaching perfection. Inside, a mother and daughter built their life around preserving that belief, one tick at a time, one repaired watch at a time, one generation at a time. And high above the town, the great clock kept perfect time, its hands moving in eternal circles, measuring the moments that make up a life, the seconds that accumulate into meaning, the continuous flow of time that stops for no one but can be honored by those brave enough to try. Elena Reeves had inherited a fortune. But more than that, she'd inherited a purpose. And in accepting that purpose, in rising to meet its challenges, she'd discovered that the greatest wealth isn't measured in dollars but in the courage to claim your own story, to write your own ending, to transform inheritance into legacy. The clocks had all stopped together, a sign she'd needed to understand. They'd stopped so she could learn to wind them again. So she could choose when to start moving forward. So she could discover that time, like life, doesn't end when it pauses. It simply waits for someone brave enough to restart it. And Elena had been brave enough. The end. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.